You go into the inner cities and you see it's 45% poverty. African Americans now 45% poverty in the inner cities. The education is a disaster.
That is Donald Trump's rather bleak view of inner cities. A new book by Cornell professor emeritus William Goldsmith, though, offers a much rosier picture of things. It's called Saving Our Cities, a progressive plan to transform urban America. We spoke with the professor a short time ago.
You look in some of the cities, though, Bill, and you'll see the crime rates down. You'll see unemployment. We've had higher rates of unemployment, although certainly you can use different metrics to measure it. Which way have we fallen even further behind?
Oh, you know, you're right. There have been revivals here and there in special places all over the country. The crime rates peaked in the 1980s, and they have certainly gone down since then. What I focus on in the book is schools, food, the drug war, and more generally austerity altogether. And what I find is that in that entire period, at the end of the Johnson administration, the federal government has withdrawn support from cities in very serious ways, so that though there are big fluctuations, there are whole neighborhoods that have where things have gotten worse and worse and worse. They've been abandoned essentially by states and by the federal government.
To put a point in that, talk about what upstream policies are, because you say as challenging as some of the situations are, they're not without hope or without solution, but you say that solution's got to come upstream. What do you mean by that?
There was a mayor of Cleveland in the early part of the 20th century who said, you know, for the city to be fishing bodies out of the river was a humane thing, a good thing to do, but it would be so much easier if they stopped tossing them in upstream. So what I see is an abandonment of cities, particularly poor neighborhoods, neighborhoods with a lot of poor people in them who are underserved, whose schools don't work well, who often don't have access to good grocery stores with fresh fruit and vegetables, who are actually attacked by a drug war that almost everyone now thinks is illegitimate, that's filling our prisons, has filled our prisons, with numbers that make us look unlike any other country on earth.
To that end, Bill, you're going to, let me say the impolitic thing, which is, you know, from being up there in Cayuga County, there's going to be other places to say, time out, Bill. We're spending more, the cost per pupil for education, let's say in the inner cities, a heck of a lot more than it is in the Tioga counties and everywhere else, and in areas that are viewing us in Sullivan County, where certainly kids are leaving in droves here, and they're not necessarily doing great there as well. Haven't the cities gotten more than their fair share? How would you explain or answer that question that, in fact, the share of the pie the cities are getting isn't what it needs to be?
Well put. Look, I wrote a book about cities and about the neglect of cities by the federal government and states. One can write a book, people do write books, about the neglect of rural areas. It's just about as bad. If we look at cities as whole metropolitan areas, we find that in the suburbs things are actually pretty good. Graduation rates on time from school are close to 100%. Most of the kids go on to college. Things are doing fine. If we look inside the cities, it's true in some small parts of the city school districts, but in the big cities where there's 500,000 or 1 million kids in school, New York, Chicago, Los Angeles, lots of other cities across the country, large portions of those school populations don't graduate on time, don't go on to college, and don't learn what they need to learn to function in the world today. That's true in abandoned rural areas as well. It's not one versus the other. This neglect is rather widespread. I
was surprised at the attention you paid in terms of what people are getting at the grocery store and what that makes a difference for. And I want to put a fine point, because you're right. Obesity, the sugar content of some of the junk foods that are out there that are available, and you don't have Trader Joe's all throughout the inner cities, that's for sure. But that said, how much would you be comfortable of almost a nanny state where we say, if you're on public assistance, there'll almost be a requirement, assuming there's availability, that people get fruits and vegetables. it'd help the diet, but wouldn't it also basically make the government, in effect, the parent?
Oh, yeah. I'd be terribly uncomfortable with any restrictions of that sort, and I certainly don't propose them. The argument I make in the long chapter on food in the city is that there's this sort of unavoidable conflict between, I guess, the legitimate interests of a few very, very large food corporations. They make their money from selling food, and they do a really good job of it, and the interests of actually not just poor people, but all of us in restricting our diets. You know, Marion Nestle, the great NYU sociologist and nutritionist, says it's really very simple. We should just eat less, eat more fruits and vegetables, get more exercise, and that's it. But pushing against this is an enormous lobby from the food corporations, which pushes through advertising, FDA regulations, USDA subsidy programs that cause us to, unfortunately, to buy more and more food than we need to buy. So this is a very long-term battle that's going to take a lot of struggle by scientists, nutritionists, advocates for the poor, people in the health business who know that obesity is actually killing lots of people. No, I don't think we should have a nanny state that restricts what we buy or what we eat. I think we should have better programs of school food, better lunch programs, better breakfast programs. And there are lots and lots of experiments with this all across the country where communities are doing this. Poor communities, rich communities, city communities, suburban communities, where food intake is actually improving for sort of experimentally small numbers of people. And I'm actually probably more encouraged by that than a lot of the other areas I studied.
I will say, when you take a look at saving our cities, you do point to green shoots, if you will, of optimism. You say more people get it right now. It's maybe a political easy soundbite to talk about austerity, but when you look at the consequences, they don't add up here. And it's not all doom and gloom. There is both recipes to get us on better footing and also some examples about people that are doing it. Again, the name of the book, Saving Our Cities, A Progressive Plan to Transform Urban America. Bill Goldsmith, Professor, I really appreciate the time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.